especially as women, with juggling all the things that all of us are juggling, and especially in a global pandemic, like we don't need more arguments right now. Like we're exhausted, right? You're probably tired and overwhelmed, and it's hard to even think about the fall coming up and what's going to happen in the world. And so, I don't think we needed an argument about why we need to pursue Jesus. We actually just need an invitation.
Hey guys, my name is Melissa Moore. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Faith, Hope, Love, where we grow together in our faith, increase in hope, and learn how to better love God and love other people. On today's episode, we are in our Momentum series based off of Hebrews 12, verses 1 through 3, and we are talking about moving forward, what it looks like to put our eyes on Jesus in practical ways every day, and in doing so, we actually benefit by experiencing the fruit of his spirit in our lives. And so right now we're kind of talking about peace, patience, kindness, and goodness. And on today's show, we are joined by guest Ashley Hales, and she is the author of A Spacious Life. So thank you, Ashley, for joining me on the show today. If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and introducing you to our listeners.
I am a busy mom of four. My husband's a pastor. I have a PhD in English, and I always thought I would write about writing. And then I think it must have been after my fourth kid where I was like, I just need a creative outlet. And so, through God's kindness and through a series of turn of events, I found myself authoring books, so writing them, where I really want to help encourage Christians to kind of develop a more robust Christian imagination. And so A Spacious Life kind of comes out of my own story, but I hope it, of course, is relevant and helpful and encouraging to those of us, right, who feel like we have to keep hustling and keep spinning plates to be worthy.
I just read your book this last week and I so enjoyed it. Like it was definitely a breath of fresh air for me. I'm a very much like go, go, go kind of person, if you can't tell. And it is something that I really have always struggled with, making time to just slow down and create space in life. And so I really love the chapter called The Spiritual Life is Not an Instant Pot. So I loved all the titles of your chapters were so interesting, but I mean, just like the way that you present this idea of slowing down is so, so needed in our culture today. So, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about your book and kind of what prompted you to write it.
Yeah, I'm an only child, and I kind of grew up where parents and culture and schools were like, just be all that you can be, right? Go grab life by the horns and land among the stars and all these cheesy things, right? That we probably, many of us heard growing up. And though that was wonderful to feel like, hey, I can try different things and I can succeed, I think the way that our kind of general American culture has kind of interpreted that message is what you need to do to be like a worthwhile human being, right? Is to always keep working harder, be fast, be fit, kind of be the best you can be in every possible area of life. And I think, social media doesn't help that. That kind of gets brought up, to the nth degree in all of our social media feeds. But I think part of that is that's the water we swim in. That if you aren't hustling and if you're not hurried, then you're not like a productive or worthwhile human being. And so I think I've noticed in my own life as I've chosen, or God has stopped me in my tracks to slow down, that our limits aren't actually things that we need to hurry past or hurtle over, that they're actually invitations to knowing God. And we see that most clearly in the life of Jesus, where he actually embraces his real limits, not like these societally imposed limits that are, oppressive or something, but, like that our bodies need sleep, or that we need to rest or to practice Sabbath, or even just paying attention to other people, that these are ways that we are invited into a Godward life that I think often we just miss because we're on this kind of revolving walkway of hustle, and it's really hard to get off. It's scary to get off. And so I noticed in my own life, just like early motherhood, especially, just feeling those limits kind of come crashing in, whether it's a lot of children or just feeling like I can't I can't keep the house clean and cook dinner and like feed a baby and like let alone have any time with Jesus or time with friends or be a good neighbor, and to feel those limits. And for a long time, I think I fought God about the difference between what I imagined my life should be or what it should look like or how much I should accomplish and what it actually did. And so I fought those limits. And so until I actually kind of gave in to them and said, all I can do today is breastfeed this baby, or all I can do is we're going to order takeout, or, I just need to sleep and this project that I have will be late and that's okay. That God desires to meet us in those limits, and he doesn't expect us to be superhuman. And so our limits are actually invitations. They're not something holding us back.
I love that. And I mean, I think our whole culture is really, really wired towards success all the time, no sleep, all hustle. And it's unfortunate because it's creating a culture of people that are, success obsessed zombies, because we're not able to show up present in the rest of our lives because we're so exhausted. And it's just, like you said with social media, there's a whole chapter on it in your book where we oftentimes, like, we only see what people put into the world, and so we assume that their lives, everything is this picture perfect thing, and it's not. We feel, we look at our own homes where there's laundry or like dishes in the sink, and it's not, we don't show that on social media. And it's so overwhelming, the pressure, I guess, this constant pressure that our society kind of puts on us to go constantly, and we weren't created to do that. I would love, you have this quote in one of your first chapters of the book that I really, really loved. I'm just going to read it so I don't butcher it. So you say, kind of in referring to the fall in the Garden of Eden, you kind of say, we begin to believe that good life is a life without limits, more fruit, more knowledge, more suspicion, more work, and more on our to-do lists to try to earn for ourselves the things we had already been given: a name, a relationship, a life, and a purpose. And you kind of said this earlier, but how does a life without limits kind of prevent us from actually having a relationship with God and embracing our God-given identity, and just rob us pretty much of enjoying what it looks like to actually live within the way we were created to live, and embracing that spirit-filled life?
I think when we choose hustle and hurry over God-given limits, it looks like exhaustion. It looks like our bodies kind of breaking down. It looks like, snapping at our children. It looks like not connecting with our husbands or good friends. And it looks like we're always trying to achieve our identity based on what we do. And whether that's paid or unpaid work, we keep trying to kind of make a name for ourselves. And that, of course, as we know, maybe you have a goal in it, whether it's in work or your home life. And once you reach that goal, then there's always like another goal, right? The everything keeps moving further along, right? Or you have more to do to kind of create that same adrenaline rush or the sense of worthiness. And what is so beautiful about the story of the gospel is that Jesus, when we have him, we get his perfection, right? And he takes all of our shame and our brokenness. And when God the Father looks at us, he sees the perfect record of Jesus. And to learn to rest in that record is really hard because, right, everything in us since the garden has been trying to tell us, like, you have to work for it, right? And we need more, right? You need like more secret knowledge or, more wisdom, right? That we think we can get apart from God. And so, hustle and hurry are just ways that we kind of look for those things today. And it's just part of the human condition. And yet, I think as we, had Eve said, like, look, I have blueberries to eat and basil to pluck and a partner to be welcomed into life with, to love God and to love him. Like, I don't need what I can trust that God is good and I don't need to take that. But instead, the desire to be like God, to be little gods ourselves is always with us and every time and place. And I think that practice of recognizing our limits and seeing them as good guardrails that move us towards God is so countercultural. Just like a little example. So we were hiking in the mountains a few weeks ago, and it was like at 8,500 feet, and I have asthma. So I'm like, I will hike. I love it. Like, I love being out in nature and with my family, and we're being active, and it gets me out of my head and my heart, which is where I tend to be. And so I'm like, I need to move my body. But I'm just like, the limits of my body right now as a 41-year-old woman who has asthma, who is at high elevation, right, is like, I'm going to be in the back and I'm going to be slow, and that's okay. And to even just, instead of turning that limit into shame of just like, I'm so out of shape, or I can't believe I can't keep up with my kids, or I can't breathe well, what's wrong with my body, is to choose to say, okay, God, like, these are my limits and I give them to you. And I trust that you're going to use them. And it's still great that I get to, be outside and be active with my kids. So there's a little example about the ways that even our self talk, how we can talk to ourselves rather than saying, you know what, we've been given a name, we've been given an identity, we've been given a purpose and joy. And I can choose to focus on those things, even with my limits, or I can choose to talk down to myself and to shame myself or blame others or control things to try to make myself a name, but we already have it.
I think that's something that, I mean, a lot of us really struggle with, right? This idea that like we are told by our culture over and over and over again what our identity is supposed to look like. And it's very, especially in social media, is very highly curated and targeted even at what we kind of are going to take in. It's something that I really have been processing, this idea that like our culture is so caters to our innate drive to succeed, right? We were created with intention and with beauty in God's image, but Satan has decided that he's going to turn us away from that. And we even see, just starting in the garden, that all he had to do was turn Adam and Eve's eyes toward what they couldn't have and away from God, even just for a short brief moment, and that changed the trajectory of all of humanity. And even now, if you look at just the way that Satan acts in our lives, this whole series we talked about this Hebrews 12 passage with running with perseverance with our eyes on Jesus. All Satan has to do is get us running super fast, but in the wrong direction. And I think that that's so easy, and I fall into that trap all the time if I'm not careful. And our culture totally perpetuates that. But I just think it's important for us to be moving forward toward Jesus, but we need to take time for rest. We need to make sure that we're actually going the right direction, because otherwise, what's the point of all the running if we're running the wrong way? So I really love how in your book you kind of talk about these kind of spiritual disciplines that we can kind of put in practice in our lives, like we're reducing or removing social media or screen distractions. That's a big thing for me. And then also, embracing silence, also difficult for me. But all of these different spiritual practices, would you mind kind of unpacking some of those and sharing what it looks like practically to live that out in our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, so the book kind of follows the life of Jesus and because he's human, he's not only God, right? And so he's also fully human, and he's perfectly God, but he's also limited because he's human. And so I follow along in some kind of bigger moments in the life of Christ, and then try to kind of connect the dots to our modern lives and what might that look like. So, for instance, I talk about Jesus taking a nap, right, on this Sea of Galilee, and the storm comes up, and that he doesn't shame his disciples, for their little faith, but he provides for them. But he also pays attention to the needs of his body. So I think, we too are encouraged to sleep, to nap, and, to practice Sabbath, right? To cease from overwork. I have a chapter on social media and choosing to kind of put that aside for a time, because I think when we're online, and particularly social media, we have this kind of sense that we can be everywhere at once. We can, in and out of conversations, or we don't have to deal with like a painful neighbor situation if we're like on Instagram. And so, I think, but what Jesus does, right, is he also chooses to wait. Like, he waits when he experiences um, the testing in the wilderness, right, with Satan. That instead of just saying like, sure, turn these stones bread and fend for myself, right? He waits on what God the Father has told him to do. So all of these sorts of things, whether it's practicing delight, I talk about as an antidote to hurry and hustle, or if it's taking a nap or putting away your phone, or even, as we think about the end of Jesus' life as he's journeying towards the cross, he chooses not only to pay attention to people, but, in the Garden of Gethsemane, another thing that he's practicing is abiding with God, his Father, in loss, right? And a lot of times we distract ourselves from loss or grief or pain, or we choose other forms of addiction to kind of ease some of the pain and the loss. And so I think all of these things really, if we let them, are not only, something that just like makes us human, but are invitations to knowing God. And so I have several things throughout the book that help us to just practice that. And I've actually created for a pre-order, which is really fun. It's called I call them pocket practices, and they're small enough. I don't have a copy right here. It's on the other side of my bedroom, but it's a downloadable PDF where I've collected a lot of these practices that I mentioned throughout the book. And you can, once you pre-order the book, you can go ahead and put your email in there, and you get the pocket practices for free when you pre-order. So before the book comes out, before September 14th, you can go to spacious.life, and you can put in your pre-order info, and you'll get those pocket practices for free. And they're really fun. I mean, fun, relative way, but they're really helpful for us to actually practice some of these things. So if you're you're waiting to pick up your kids in the carpool line at school, and you find yourself gripped by existential angst about what you're doing with your life and how many things you have to do, and the plates are all spinning, there's good reminders, there's thoughtful questions, there's kind of emergency practices when you find yourself in places maybe of dread or sadness or loss, to actually practice being with Jesus and seeing our limits as good.
I love that. And I know for me, when I'm in the carpool lane, I'm always just, my immediate thing is to either pick up a book, but more often it's picking up my phone and just scrolling on Instagram. And it's so easy to do that. But I think what you're saying is we have to be intentional in these practices if we want to see our lives change. If we want to create a spacious life, we have to do the work. And, so again, if you pre-order the book before the 14th, you can have access to these amazing specials. You can keep them literally in your car at all times.
I have it in a little 3-ring clip and everything too, so I can quick go through them.
I love it. So before you get the book in your hands, you already have those to kind of get a jump start on it as well. So I love it. And I feel like each section of the book, as I was reading through it, it hit these real heartfelt needs in myself that I know that there are things I need to address, but it's so much easier to not, if that makes sense. And so I think being able to have it in a book that is, so beautifully written, and again, centers on the life of Jesus, it helps us to see practically the goodness that can come from living a more spacious life. And again, I kind of talked about it earlier, but the fruit of the Spirit, peace, patience, kindness, and goodness, those things don't really flow from a hurried soul. And if we want to experience those fruit in our lives, we have to make space for them. We can't expect that we're going to be patient with our kids. I know that's a big thing for me, being patient and good in my relationships with my friends and my family. I can't do and be those things if my heart is just running a million miles an hour. So definitely go pick up, pre-order your copy, and again, have these little printables in your car, so that when you're in those moments where you're tempted just to run to Facebook, you can take the time to work on some of these practices. And again, it takes practice. So
yeah. And I think when I realized, at first when I wanted to write the book, I was I wanted to kind of pick apart all of the cultural narratives, right, that are telling us to hustle and hurry and pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. And as the book went through several writings and editings and everything, I realized, especially as women, with juggling all the things that all of us are juggling, and especially in a global pandemic, we don't need more arguments right now. We're exhausted, right? You're probably tired and overwhelmed, and it's hard to even think about the fall coming up. and what's going to happen in the world. And so, I don't think we needed an argument about why we need to like pursue Jesus. We actually just need an invitation, right? We need gentle invitations. We need to be convinced again that God is good, that he sees us, that he sees you with your hands in the dishwater dishes, dishwashing, um, and that he sees you and with your limits and your frailty and the times that you're not patient with your kids, and that he's kind and compassionate towards our feelings, right? He says that a bruised reed he's not going to break. So I take great courage in that, in my own feelings, that as I admit even the limits of my sin too, right? That Jesus will meet us in them.
I love it. Again, I feel like you're really speaking right to me. I love it. And I need that reminder that like, even in those moments, yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, the moments where, again, you're just washing dishes, there's times where I'm like, I feel like I should be like listening to a podcast or doing something else to like make this not a waste of time. And I'm like, why can't I just slow down and embrace this as an opportunity just to talk with God or just be in silence, I don't know. It's something I know I'm definitely going to need to think and pray about. Like, what does this look like for me to allow myself to slow down?
Yeah, and what's behind our habits of hurry, or when we reach for our phones, like what are we trying to push off, and can we maybe try bringing that to God?
Absolutely. Before we kind of close out, is there like maybe a final word you would share with the woman that maybe is feeling trapped in her hurried life and wants to kind of start implementing this, but she doesn't really know where to start? Maybe a scripture or a word of encouragement. What would you say to that woman?
Well, I think there is no better time, right? Everyone says like there's no better time to start than yesterday, and if it's not yesterday, then it's today. But that's all from all these gurus that tell you to keep hustling and hurrying. So we don't want to do that necessarily, but I think what we tend to think that, right, I'll get to this spacious life, I'll get to all these spiritual disciplines, I'll see the fruit of the spirit grow in my life, like when things slow down, right? Or, when my kids are all in school, or a different season, or once we have a promotion, or once I get in shape, or whatever it is. And I just want to encourage women who are listening and watching that God desires to meet you in your actual life, not in like this fake imagined one day future life that may not happen. And so we can take courage. Jesus, there's so many stories in the Gospels, right? Even I'm just thinking of one time, right, when Jesus is teaching in the synagogue, he's preaching, and then this woman walks in and she's bent over and crippled, and he stops what he's doing and he pays attention to the woman, and he touches her, like, and he heals her, and she is able to straighten up. And so I would just ask you guys, and I ask this myself too, where do you need the touch of Jesus? I think sometimes we tend to divide our work too into like sacred work, good work for Jesus, and secular work, everything else. But right in that instance, Jesus is doing quote unquote sacred work, and then healing, which is quote unquote like secular work. But he puts it together, that there's no division between God honoring work, whether you're like feeding your kids or feeding people in a soup kitchen. And so if you're feeling that pull, I would just encourage you to bring that to Jesus and ask God, where can you touch me? Where do I need healing? Um, where do I need you to pay attention to me? And how might I be running from you? And so a real practical thing might be to look at your calendar for a week, or if you're looking at it and your kids' schedules are getting filled up, is to look at how many squares are filled up, and to remember that the right no's make room for the right yeses, so that there's actually space, right? Space to grow, space to be with a hurting friend, space to actually like bend down and look your kids in the eyes instead of being like, quick, 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 get shoes on, we've got to do all the errands, which is my default. But is to look at those and to see like, how full is this, and can I actually say some no's here so that there's room for the right yeses to grow. That might be just a real practical way that you are able to deduce your hurried state of your soul and to practice something a little different.
I love that. And again, that's something I feel like all of us have some no's that we should be saying. Um, there's so much. And again, like being able to set those limits that again, our world says are negative, right? But truly those are the things that allow us to connect with God. If we don't make the time to do it, it's not going to happen. If we don't create a spacious life, it's not going to just happen on accident. So gosh, I love it. And I'm excited to get my hands on a physical copy of your book and not just the PDF. And so I know people can pre-order the book right now. Where can they do that?
Yes, well, you can wherever books are sold, but for sure, my publisher is offering a little pre-order discount on their website. So if you go to ivpress.com and you search A Spacious Life, you can use Hales, which is my last name, with 30 and get 30% off, which is pretty fabulous as a pre-order bonus. So that's one option. Of course, you can buy on Amazon or wherever that you choose to purchase books. So you can grab them there, and you can find out more details if you need to at my website. You can just look it's really easy. I just like made it the title of the book. So it's spacious.life, and you can find a free quiz there about what your hustle habit is and a roadmap to help you kind of work through the ways that we choose hustle instead of a more spacious life. And yeah, links to pre-order there as well. So thanks.
Awesome. I love it. And I know I need to take the quiz. I actually think I already know my hustle habits, but it probably doesn't hurt to have a quiz tell me too.
Right.
So, Ashley, I just so appreciate you taking the time just to chat with us today and for, again, putting your book out into the world and really putting in a physical format these spiritual habits and disciplines that we can kind of integrate into our lives to experience that more spacious life. So thank you for joining us on the show.
You're so welcome.
And well, everyone that's listening today, thanks for joining me on today's episode. I will see you back here next week.